Now, a price cap on Russian oil has come into force today as the G7 group of Western countries attempts to increase the pressure on Vladimir Putin further. Joining me now to discuss the situation, retired Air Vice Marshal Sean Bell. Sean, let's talk about that point first of all. Just how much pressure is this price cap going to put on the Kremlin, do you think?
Yeah, good afternoon, SJ. Let's be clear, this only applies to Russian oil that's being sold for less than $60 a barrel. Only that can be carried by the G7 allies or insured by the G7 ally or its allies. The plan is to make it very difficult for Russia to sell its oil at anything more than $60 a barrel. Sounds great. The trouble is Russia is the second largest producer of oil in the world next to Saudi Arabia. Whilst the West has definitely reduced its reliance on Russian oil, the spare capacity has been lapped up by China and India along the way. President Zelensky has described this as a really weak position for the G7 to take. And actually, we've seen the oil price go up overnight as a result.
Explosions at Russian air bases, reports of. What do we know about the circumstances surrounding these?
Yeah, so a couple of unverified explosions at two Russian air bases well behind the front line, Engels and D. Agalivo up here. They're hundreds of kilometres away from the battlefront here. Follows weeks and weeks of intense Russian bomber activity targeting infrastructure across the whole of the Ukraine, including today at Kyiv area and Zaporizhzhia area. We've got Sky-verified footage here of the explosion at the Engels air base. What we don't know yet is the cause of these explosions. Very difficult. There's lots of speculation. We must be careful not to get drawn into that. What we do know is the Western precision military support for Ukraine is specifically predicated on them not using any weapons on Russian soil for risk of escalation. So we're pretty confident it's not that. But it could have been an accident at the air bases or an act of sabotage. Engels Air Base is incredibly busy. We've got a satellite footage here of showing a lot of the state-of-the-art Russian bombers are being based out of there. This was taken just a week ago. Interesting to note, though, the Russian Air Force, if you wind back the clock to the start of this campaign, they were flying over 300 missions a day. Now that's less than 40, largely because they're running short of precision weapons. So the pilots have to see the target now before they can release a weapon. Winter weather, lots of clouds, can't see that. Massive reduction in sorties.
Let's turn our attention to what's happening on the ground in Ukraine. Winter well and truly here, and the conditions for the fighting in Ukraine getting worse by the day.
They are, and we're reporting on our weather that the cold snap coming to the UK of -8. It's -20 in Ukraine and likely getting worse. That's pretty significant. Two examples of how that impacts fighting on the ground, one of which is foliage. It's very obvious, but the trees shed their leaves, the bushes. And here's some footage provided by the Ukrainians targeting Russian positions. Draw your attention to the fact, though, that there's no leaves, so all of a sudden the cover that's provided by the trees is not there. Both sides are using drones to target the enemy's positions. And here's a really good example. This is a Russian soldier in the middle of a little bit of woodland. You would never have seen him a month ago because he'd have been covered by the woodlands. Now, incredibly vulnerable, and that's one of the challenges of winter. The other challenge, of course, is clothing. -20, most of us have never experienced it, apart from when you're on winter operations, but it's really difficult to survive. The West is providing a load of equipment to the Ukrainians, but the Russian conscripts almost certainly don't have anything like that. And it's very reminiscent of the 1942, 1943 Second World War, siege of Stalingrad, when the German soldiers, 100,000 of them, actually froze to death because they didn't have the right kit and equipment. The winter, yeah, tempo of fighting may have reduced, but it's not stopping. And in many ways, the fighting is going to get even more dangerous in the coming months.
OK, Sean, thank you. Sean Bell with the latest there on Ukraine.